asking what's going on. It's quite political. Is it necessary? But we'll get to also understand from you how the Senate really works. On this day 2 of the trial, the impeachment trial facing the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, we'll walk you through every step. Every other time we have to cross over to the Senate. And of course, we're expecting them to resume at 9 a.m. today. Cross-examinations happened yesterday, evidence questioning, and of course we saw quite a number of different, lawyers questioning, different members of parliament, and a bit of humor as well was evident in the House. But of course, let's start with the front page of the Standard, that is the bold newspaper, and just to hear from the guests as well what they think of these headlines this morning. And Rigathi's bruising battle, all right? Now, tough exchange, like I mentioned earlier on. Once we have that on your screen, you'll follow closely with me as well. When DP Rigathi Gachagua appeared before the Senate, he was reeling from a string of losses in the National Assembly and the courts. And his early prayers to Speaker Kingi yesterday suffered the same fate, on leaving him to face his accusers in a bare-knuckled war that saw his lawyers rip through Kibwezi Member of Parliament Mwengi Mutuse's evidence in a surgical cross-examination wherein the motion mover admitted to several inadequacies. Of course, that's going to come to you shortly. Let's hear from the guest, even as I take my seat. What do you think of that headline? They're talking about a bruising battle. Let me start with Pugisio.
Well, thank you very much. And by the way, the title is befitting. It is a bruising battle. It's the last kicks as it were, the Deputy President. Today could make or break him. This is a decision day. His lawyers are fighting very hard. But it's true. This headline says that it's a bruising battle and a string of losses. It's if you go by that, if you're not determined, you might think, if you think about the losses from the day that he was impeached at the National Assembly level, gone to the courts, and the courts allowed the Senate to proceed. And now this is it. It's the final. Although he has a reprieve that he could go back to the courts. But this is it. The determination can be done today, and looks to me like everybody's arranged or planned, line up everything for the day when he will be removed. And maybe even an appointment can be done for a new DP. So this is what I think is, those who pray for the Deputy President, this is when they should go on their knees more, pray more, and wish him the best. The lawyers are doing a very good job.
They're doing a very good job?
On both sides.
Okay.
The lawyers are doing a good job, but the determination is this, and the biggest determination is today. My feeling is that when the preliminary objections were denied, that can be a very bad sign in something like this, because once you raise the POs, remember the impeachment of the Kericho governor was finished at the preliminary objections. So it is possible that then, after those have been denied, the evidence in chief, the cross-examinations, and so on, will now have to determine whether the Deputy President will survive this one. The other, of course, hope is that senators will be independent in their voting, and that they will be able to reason on each of these counts.
So Senate will be independent. I'll come back to you because there are questions of how numbers work and how ODM and UDA might overtake this process. But let me hear the opening remarks of Nora Bosibori, who is a policy analyst and a younger voice in as far as that is concerned. You've also followed politics here and there. I would like to understand, do you trust this process? What is your stand in as far as the impeachment of the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, is concerned?
So good morning, Doris, once more. So for me, my consideration is that the Deputy President is putting up a spirited fight, and that I like his resolve that no matter what, he wants to be heard. And he wants to be heard by the citizens and even the courts and the Senate. So putting himself out there, you know, to play matters of material, you know, all the evidence that was provided. He's put himself out there so that he's able to prove his innocence. So for me, I think in matters, you know, trying to get justice for himself, he's on the right track. But of course, we know that our courts are courts of law, not courts of justice. Then that begs the question, what next about procedures versus substance?
Let me pick that again, and I know that Pogisio also followed when you said our courts are the courts of law and not courts of justice.
Sure.
Could you please expound that more for us, because we do not want to misinterpret what you have said.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
So of course, you know, in the law, it's about procedures and evidence.
Yes.
Right? And that as long as the Senate is doing the mandate procedurally within the standing orders, then they are all allowed by the law to proceed and impeach if they find any impeachable offenses. And you see, Doris, that there are 11 of them.
Yes.
11, and any of those will take him home.
Right.
Any of them, no matter insignificant it is. So that means then that as much as he's putting a spirited fight and you know, trying to trash all these allegations through all those 11 offenses, then it might even come to a point where a frivolous, a very small information can be able to take him home. So that's why I'm saying that in this part of process, it's about the procedure and the law, and they're not gonna, you know, come into the emotions of him as a person, as the people he represents, and if justice has been served.
I mean, there's some of these claims that I'm looking at the front page of the paper. You know, the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, one of the claims is that he traveled to London in February 2017 to oversee the signing of a will by his ailing brother. On that day that Rigathi Gachagua died, the Deputy President allegedly was withdrawing money from his account. If you follow closely, Advocate Njoroge Regeru and businessman Mwai Mathenge raised the objections on how the Deputy President was handling his brother's property, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua acquired a Treetops Hotel without following proper procurement process. They're also alleging that Gachagua acquired Vipingo Ridge, a property initially owned by his late brother, at a cost of 250 million shillings. And Gachagua acquired Olive Gardens, allegedly, that hotel in Nairobi, previously also owned by his late brother. And the last one, Gachagua acquired property owned by his brother despite being an executor of his will. Now, there's something Bosibori has said, and I want to hear from the former majority leader in the Senate. Any of those grounds will take him home. But there's something she said, no matter how less significant it is. I don't know if you heard that statement.
I did.
What do you make of that statement? Because Kenyans are watching as well. It has to be a significant, you know, ground. It has to be proven. But, or is it just a political process, and even if it's not significant, it would take him home?
Well, remember, Doris, that there are certain categories that all these counts belong to.
Okay.
Either it is about the Constitution, either it is abuse of office, or whatever it is. There are certain, probably 3 categories that, or 4 that usually have on impeachment. And it have to fit into one of those 3 or 4 categories. First of all,
yes, and you can share them with us, because I think it's
I think it is the breaching any of our laws or the Constitution, the abuse of office, and the third one is what is the third one now?
Is it gross misconduct?
Gross misconduct. Yeah, just like that.
Okay.
So once you fit into one of those, you must fit into those. You must prove that he did not break any of this, or did not actually fail in this. Actually, the word they use is that they have to find one of these counts to be substantiated. And if it is just 1 out of 11, he goes home. The ruling will be then, the vote will then be put to the plenary in the Senate, and they will have to confirm that. And once they confirm that, the Speaker's duty is simply to announce that this and that has been proved to be substantiated, and that will be the end of what you would call impeachment. And the determination is that the Deputy President has been impeached. The stories that we hear now is that we are doing this exceptional job of impeaching our deputy president that no one else has done anywhere. In fact, not successfully. Not even the US has successfully or done any impeachment like this. Impeachments, by the way, are political processes. And we've seen that even American presidents who have been impeached, you would think that if it were just about the law, if it were just about justice, they would have gone home. But somehow in the political process, you find that there are still precedents, even thereafter impeachment. If you take the case of Donald Trump, you take the case of Bill Clinton. So sometimes Kenyans think, listening to the lawyer's argument and the court of Kenya. So you'll find that the arguments yesterday were very impressive, and you would think maybe they're making headway somewhere. But finally, it's going to be a political decision. And the Senate is a political house.
All right.
And the Senate is made up of political parties and parliamentary groups. And so it will be very difficult for any individual in the Senate who has his own mind, who wants to be independent. It will be difficult for that person not to listen to his parliamentary group. And the parliamentary group has definitely got ideas as to how you vote. And that's why when you think you have sympathy, you may find that has vanished within a very short time, because then there are instructions. There are instructions from the parliamentary groups. And in this case, we are looking at a tyranny of numbers happening in our parliament today because of the former opposition joining with UDA or government, and therefore forming a bigger bloc that could throw this thing into just a single vote. You don't even have to do it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want us to also look at, because you said it was quite interesting yesterday. I mean, day one, and you could see Kenyans online, following in those online chats. It was, if anyone would use the word, impressive how Kenyans were engaging. And the cross-examination was very, very interesting, because there's one part that I picked out, and I want to understand if you saw it as well, Bosibori, that the former senator, he served 2 terms as a senator, but now Governor Orengo, is, lead counsel for the accusers, the National Assembly. But that came up yesterday, and they're saying you cannot work in a public service and then have another economic income just like that. I don't know what you thought of that argument, really, at that point in time. And is it a bit, amusing then to hear that Orengo is then standing in as lead counsel for the National Assembly in accusation of the deputy president?
So, of course, Doris, I think the deputy president should be accorded justice. And, Orengo coming to represent either party, I don't know whether then it calls the question of conflict of interest. Because at the end of the day, if you were a state officer, yes, he's not come there gainfully, he might not be paid, but then whose interests is he serving? And especially because as a state officer, he should be impartial in nature.
Now, I'm told we have to quickly check on a technical hitch, but I'll come back to you on that matter. So we're looking at the impeachment of the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. I'm here with very key guests, but once again, just remind you to grab a copy of the Bold newspaper, and let me just share that with you. On the front page is Rigathi's bruising battle. It's a tough exchange that we saw yesterday in the House. That was day one of the impeachment trial, and a number of claims came up, including, Rigathi Gachagua's presence in London, him by his brother, and overseeing the signing of the will by his ailing brother. There's questions around how he acquired the Vipingo Ridge, among other things. That, of course, at a cost of 250 million. But of course, we also know that members of parliament are planning for a special sitting as DP succession hits high gear. Remember, we've also shared right here that we might be having a new deputy president by end of week. How the constitution plays out, we'll also continue to engage the former majority leader, Pogisio, who is with us here in studio, and the policy analyst, of course, Bosibori. But for now, remember that there's hope for SMEs as well as banks to offer 150 billion shillings in loans and more Adani-like deals on the way. That is what the CS is saying. You'll see that on page 11 of the Bold newspaper. The government is eyeing 5 Adani-like deals to push through projects without straining the exchequer or resorting to borrowing. If we're not taking a very short break, let me hear from Pogisio, because I was bringing in the idea of former senator and now governor Orengo, who is also a senior counsel, really, stepping in as lead counsel for the National Assembly. What would be your argument?
I watched that. I saw
Yes.
Governor Orengo in the opening statements for the National Assembly.
Yes.
That means he was the lead lawyer, was the lead lawyer for that. And it did not augur very well for the image that it's painted. Because I know that when he was in the Senate with me, he would stand in and probably defend the Senate, but he was then a member of the Senate. Now this is a National Assembly thing that he has come out. He's a very senior, prominent lawyer in town, but his new role as a public officer, state officer, government, public officer, whatever it is, offers him an opportunity there to just step outside of that and be able to, advise maybe from the sides. He could probably have advised the same team or worked with the same team without having to be the face of that. But, because there's a case going on, and so, I mean, even the preliminary objections could have raised all that. But he argues that he's a lawyer of great repute and he's a private practitioner. And I think our system in Kenya has allowed that to happen. That you can actually be running a business of government and be a lawyer at the same time and practice. And that is the question. It's a big question about integrity and other things. So I'd like to see that. How is that interpreted by our courts? How is that interpreted by our justice system? But if you're looking for the best lawyers in this country, he's one of them.
And how would you look at it politically? Because Orengo is no stranger to the courts. He is a veteran counsel who led the opposition chief Raila Odinga's legal team, remember, in the historic case in the Supreme Court, which overturned the re-election of the former president Uhuru Kenyatta in 2017. Now, this is a moment when, and of course I'll hear from Bosibori shortly, when we're looking at the broad-based government. In fact, there are questions of if the successor or replacement of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, if impeached successfully, might come from the, ODM side. I mean, what do you think is politically playing out? Or should we just see it for what it is, that Orengo is just a professional in this time? Or is it a coincidence?
No, it cannot be a coincidence. And by the way, it also tells a story. It gives a view into what's going to happen, even in the voting and so on. Because what that means is that you have already combined forces, and so UDA and ODM have combined forces, and therefore, if their team of lawyers can work for this particular thing, it's just a very straight indication that already it could influence how people vote. It could influence the decisions made, and I do hope that. They see that as a possibility of influencing the voting. I don't think there's a coincidence that Orengo would be called from CIA, where he was running the business of government, to come and do this. It cannot be a coincidence. It must be part of a bigger plan.
All right.
So I do see that, and I think even citizens must see that as well. It doesn't give very good hope for the independence of members of parliament, because if we already taken on the duty, that means we are indicating the direction of things. Indicating the direction of things,
not forgetting how they're over, at the National Assembly, even just at the stage of appending signatures, they already, they shot overboard through the threshold. And if you saw those who voted in favor of the impeachment on the day of voting, 282 members of parliament. So Bosibori, you are a great advocate, and you advocate for good manners, if I would say that politically. What Pogisio is saying is, you will argue whatever you have to argue. At the end of the day, numbers will come into play, politics will come into play. Are you still not convinced that when you're speaking of justice, sometimes politics might not give you that?
Going by the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, what did they envision when they brought about this provision of impeachment? Of course, we realized that they wanted us to hold our leaders to a more higher moral ground, and of course, we realize now that Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua's impeachment is about the acceptable norms of behavior, the code of conduct. And that has been playing out there in the public gallery and even on the evidence that was adduced in court. So then this begs the question, what about the prosecuting agencies? What about the trial chamber, which is the Senate? What about the motions, the people who brought about the motion, who is the lower house? What about them? Do we also hold them to higher moral standing? But because at the end of the day, I go by the mantra that Caesar's wife should be beyond reproach, that our MPs, members of parliament, both in the lower and the upper house, should be able to show us that they are kind of bound by integrity and the values and the social fabric that govern all of us. But then going by what has been done previously, historically, from both the National Assembly and the Senate. And every time I appear in the media, I always say that, for example, let's look at Governor Mwangaza's impeachment. Having followed through the process, we were rightfully told that these were trivial issues that could have been resolved through other dispute mechanism opportunities out there, even within the county level. But then what happened? A member of the Senate came about and told us that there was a call and people, members of the Senate were whipped to vote in a particular manner.
Right.
And these are the people who are trying the deputy president. So that is why I was saying that sometimes these things are not about really justice, but just procedurally. And of course, if we're following the letter about the Constitution, we will always find something to pull somebody down. But then, does it then pass the threshold that the Constitution envisioned?
So in other words, according to you, the deputy president is not guilty?
The deputy president,
unless you can prove that to us, because it's still under trial.
It might be, I don't want to go to the merits of the case, but of course, the deputy president should be called to order, because he had intimated that the country's ownership is in terms of the marginal contribution of votes during the electioneering period.
All right.
He was using that principle. And he has shown clearly what they signed, of course. And we know that definitely all these agreements do not augur well with the Constitution, so they might be null and void ab initio, right? We don't care about them because at the end of the day, they're unconstitutional. But then he has shown categorically that there was an arrangement of sorts.
Okay.
And that he's only pronouncing what was suggested on paper. So for me then, I think he should have been guided. He should have been sanctioned. But impeaching him is stretching it too far.
Let me hear from our other very key guest, Stephen Gikonyo, who is a political analyst. And thank you very much for creating time. You just walked in when Bosibori was sharing her or giving her submissions, and you've heard what she has said. Maybe your opening remarks, and perhaps if you also want to add on to what she has said, or disagree with it, or just do you share the same sentiments. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning. This is a very interesting process that we are all witnessing. It's been a long night of phone calls and discussions and analysis, and definitely it's going to be a game changer in our country in terms of utterances that people make without considering the legal or lawful consequences of such utterances. We are waiting to see whether there's a way that His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua's team will save him from the dragnet, if you will, of charges, and whether he'll survive those charges. So it's we tend to mix issues when we face them. So sometimes you hear that he's not the only corrupt person, or if at all he is. and other times you will hear that many people have made worse utterances and so on. Unfortunately, he's the one who is currently accused. And so whether others have done it or not is not in question. What's in question is whether what he has been accused of has merit or is just charges that are thrown at him. So today we'll see the conclusion of this process.
Yes. Now, even as we're speaking, I'm looking at what happened yesterday. And even if you followed the cross-examination, I mean, what did you pick from it? We saw quite a number of cross-examinations on, with a member of parliament, Mutuse. At some point, he looked like he wouldn't respond. Ultimately, he would respond with, statements like, I do not have that. I didn't have access to it. But he did, sponsor the motion. He presented it before the parliament, and you saw the vigor of which the member of parliament presented the motion in the National Assembly. Did you see any difference on him or with him in the Senate yesterday?
Definitely there was a difference. One, I think, is because he was in his home chamber, if you will. So there's comfort in that, and he's also the one driving the motion, if you will. So, but here he is, at the trial chamber, if you can use that term, and he was being questioned.
Yes.
And he was sincere in saying that he didn't have some of those answers. And of course, a lot of people were disappointed that, how come you don't have the answers? You should have had time. I can't imagine the kind of pressure he's going through in terms of being the sponsor of the motion, as well as now the seemingly defendant of the motion. So time will tell how that pans out for him.
Let me hear from Pogisio, because I have this written down. And MP Mutuse was on the spot over evidence. That is, of course, if I pick one, lawyer Elisha Ongonya. So to know whether there exists any laws that prohibit the deputy president from calling for empathy at a press conference. This is something that Mutuse brought out at the National Assembly. And he said he sponsored this on the 8th of October. It was, members of parliament approved the impeachment, but he was lost for words, eventually admitted that there was no such law. He is a lawyer, if you follow closely. But at some point, the deputy president, in this same presser that is being referred to, alluded to the fact that Mutuse was just given a document, and he just signed it, didn't even know what is in it. I'm trying to put these two statements together, what the deputy president said and what we saw Member of Parliament Mutuse bring out yesterday. Are they marrying each other, or are we overreading? Pogisio.
Doris, being in two different positions that Mutuse was, placed in, he was placed in a very awkward position. First of all, as the lead accuser, and then secondly, as being put on the dock to defend himself. Those are two different positions. You can do very well in leading a charge, in prosecuting, and then when you are now on the other side of it, being cross-examined, you could actually lose your track. Because I think you prepared so much for moving this motion with a lot of help from other people. Information was coming, and you put those together, and you thought you had a very good case. And now it's being, holes are being poked in that particular thing by senior lawyers who actually know what they're doing. And anybody would crack under those things, and they push you for answers, and you think you have them, and you realize actually when I was doing this motion, it was by the help, and he even accepted it. It was helped by a lot of people. He said whistleblowers,
yes,
and things like that.
And that he could not really tell us the identity.
So when you're excited about a case, it sounds good. And now you're being asked to substantiate it. It can be very difficult. So Mutuse, a bit cracked a bit. And he felt like sometimes he was inadequate. The idea of this is, and I see the danger in this for politicians. Politicians have so reduced the threshold for impeachment, and without knowing or even thinking that they are creating a precedent for themselves. It's something that you are doing. You're setting this precedent. If, for example, the deputy president spoke certain things And he said certain things, maybe in jest. And he is now being faced with this. Now, that already is a precedent. Next time there's somebody to be impeached, we'll go for your speeches. We'll go for what you said. And you know, politicians are not safe from where they spoke. They realize very soon that they created this monster for themselves. And so I'd like to see that when you prepare something for just one person, a law, or try to create a place where you can actually impeach one person because you're determined to do it, think about what could happen to you or to any other person thereafter. Because now all these things are going to be part of impeachment processes as a precedent. And it'll be used against any one of us. So everyone, and you cannot, as they say, the internet doesn't forget. And you cannot go back and try to redo what you have said. So all the things that have been spoken by politicians, the contradictions and so on. So everyone watch out. You have already done it for yourselves. That's what I can say.
Setting precedents. Bosibori, I do not know what you made of yesterday's cross-examinations of Member of Parliament of Kibwezi West.
I think it was below par.
Below par, how he performed or how the lawyers performed?
How he performed.
Okay.
First of all, in law, he who alleges must prove.
Right.
If you allege, you bring material evidence to back up your allegations. So, I watched with utter consternation when the Honorable Member for Kibwezi was struggling with his own motion, with his own evidence. So then it calls into pertinent questions of what exactly led to this? How convinced were you that these were impeachable offenses without really interrogating your own evidence to show that it meets the basic threshold? And of course, like just Honorable Pogisho has said, there's a problem when our institutions, our constitutional institutions, are used to fight partisan wars. Because this is really just partisan wars.
Okay.
Because number one, we've seen over time historically how people, even MPs in the Senate and the National Assembly, have always been whipped to vote in a particular manner. And that in that process then, you do not get justice. It all depends with who is calling the shots at that time. And of course, now that the executive has a lot of support in the House, up to about 85%. Does it mean then that the state is muzzling the voices of the people through the MPs? Because we know that democracy backsliding usually starts with this kind of processes, whereby we use institutions. Instead of doing the right thing with those institutions, we weaponize them to be able to fight people who come in with divergent views, who do not agree with what we believe in. And therefore, we have to pave way. They have to be chased out of the system. So I think these are just partisan wars, and that our institutions are being weaponized so that they can be used to muzzle the people.
I don't know what you think of that analysis and, of course, her thoughts, because there's one thing being, and I think Honorable Pogisho spoke to that matter, that it is a political process. And she's talking about the whipping of these, senators or members of parliament. For her is, those who are accused being denied justice. And I think the Kenyans need to understand how it works, because I remember the court saying they will not interfere with the procedures in the National Assembly, neither will they interfere with the public participation. They also just yesterday said they will not interfere with the Senate, but they're open to another approach once this process is over and done within Senate. Maybe we need to talk about it, Stephen, from the angle of Bosibori, and maybe the viewer who's watching back at home and doesn't really understand the difference between the courts and how the Senate is going to be working.
Okay. I don't think these are partisan wars at this moment, because you have people from all parties participating in it, and as we saw in the Assembly, voting on the impeachment motion. And therefore, it's not partisan at this particular point. We've also seen people from the primary opposition party, ODM, coming to join government. So there's a convergence of parties.
They actually said they didn't join government.
That's what they said.
They said they're
you know, if someone is holding hands with another,
all right,
you cannot claim that they're not together. You know, they're holding hands. So nothing wrong with that. It's part of our process. One of the challenges, well, not challenges, but realities of our political system is that we're not entirely ideologically different. You know, so it's always a question of who's going to win and what you get thereafter and so on. Now, in terms of fairness, we are yet to conclude whether this process is fair or not. But one aspect of being fair is for the accused to be heard and for the accused to render their defense. And we saw that happen yesterday, and we're going to continue seeing that today. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, defense and even the prosecution, if you will, tend to forget or get out of the target. Sometimes you'll talk about how something has been presented, and you talk about how it's been laid out and who should appear and who should not, and so on and so forth. But you miss the substance of the matter, and it may have been stated wrongly, it may have appeared wrongly, but does it destroy the accusation? Right. Does it limit the purpose for which the impeachment is being done? So I think at this point we have to wait and see how the process goes, whether it is fair or not, whether he was heard or not, and then make a determination from there.
We're yet to see the fairness, but I'm still with you, Stephen. We're yet to see how this process ends and the fairness, but we already have names that are being fronted to replace the deputy president. And you're seeing members of parliament, all right, come out to say, we sense betrayal. This is supposed to come back home. This kind of conversations, when you are here this morning saying, it's a wait and see, we're yet to see. And we have, you know, newspapers publishing that by end of week or by Saturday, we could be looking at a new deputy president. Are you being honest with the viewers today?
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with anticipating the expected outcome. The mere fact that the impeachment was actually tabled and that it actually went through the National Assembly is quite weighty. And now this secondary process, it will be astonishing if the deputy president comes through this impeachment process. But one of the questions I was asking, and I'm sure many others have been asking, is does he know something that we don't know? Because initially, when you see the arrangements being done, and you're aware that the impeachment is actually coming, and then you go out and give your defense to the public the day before you have to appear, many people thought, okay, the resignation or a resignation is following that effort. Then the deputy president and his team show up at the National Assembly, and they sit through that process, and the impeachment is passed in short order. So then again, we anticipate that he's going to speak or even, you know, render his resignation. He doesn't do that. So at this point, you have to wonder, does he know something we don't know? All right. And does he still believe that he's going to pass through this process? When you look at it from a high level, it doesn't look possible because they need just one to go through. So the possibility that that will happen, say for a crisis in the chamber, it's a wait and see, really.
It's a wait and see.
Yeah, but the anticipation is that it's a difficult uphill task.
Let me come back to Pogisio. Now, what we're looking at is, I think, 5 hours. You know, so that there is that sort of, you know, we are giving a chance for you to be heard. But there are questions, and that I will continue to discuss. You said earlier on that there will be the senators will vote independently. The confusion is there will be independent voting, but there will be whipping. All right. Now, which one is it? Because they will be whipped, and at some point you pledge allegiance to your party. So at what point do they act independently? At what point do they then vote as the party has dictated, that we want this guy out of power?
I take it that the Senate, it's a different outfit. The reason people put trust in the Senate as a trial chamber is, first of all, it's a smaller house, but these people represent 47 counties and delegations from 47 counties. I'm told, of course, when we're impeaching governor, the people who vote are the 47 delegations. The threshold for the deputy president may mean that everybody votes. That's 67. So that means there is a big chance for some kind of independent voting to happen. However, as I said before, every member belongs to a parliamentary group. And so one morning you could wake up thinking, I have the support of this member, but then they're whipped. And in just one moment they're whipped, they're told, this is a decision of the party.
They are told.
Yes, it's a decision of the party. The party position on this is this. So it happens. So you come back in the afternoon, or they'll take a break anyway before they come to vote. Come back and the vote has changed. You find yourself, somebody has been told, this is a line to toe. This is a political process. This is in fact, as I was saying, it looks like a court, a trial chamber. It works like a court. You could see all the arguments, and the speaker, fortunately, is a lawyer. So he would sit there as a judge, and the rest of the members would sit there as a jury. And so the jury will make a decision, and an announcement will be made by the lead of the jury, who is the speaker, and he will just pronounce that we have found this count to be substantiated. And once that is done, you know that's really the end of the story. So the argument you're trying to raise here is they really independent? There are some members of the Senate whom I know, come rain or shine, will not obey their parties because they are independent. They will vote independently. Those may be a handful, very few, who can do that. The rest will wait to be told. There's a danger already, precedent already, because we have seen what happened in the National Assembly. And so that fear that the transfer from the National Assembly of the same concept to the Senate will definitely be something to watch. And I hope, and I still hope, that the Senate, the way they argue, even the members when they were asking cross-examination questions, you would think they're independent. You would really hope that they remain that way. But as I said, it's a political process. Okay. There's political parliamentary groups, and you know, don't count your egg, whatever, your chicken before they hatch.
Interesting. I want to take a very short breather, but just to give a quick recap, the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, yesterday pleaded not guilty to each of those grounds of impeachment. Each of those, he pleaded not guilty. We have seen two very key legal teams led by Senior Counsel Paul Muite and the other representing the National Assembly, the accusers by the Senior Counsel Governor Orengo. Now, these are serious reasons, and they're saying there are serious reasons to believe that His Excellency the Deputy President has committed gross economic crimes under Section 45(1), 46, Section 47A, 3, and 48(1) of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, and Sections 2, 3, and 4, and 7 of the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, according to these particular charges. Let's come back after this break and look again closer into how do you even then prove, not in the Senate, maybe in the courts, because the Deputy President was very clear that he has more faith in the corridors of justice than he does in the Senate. We'll be right back.